Picture this. You are out with your friends at a party on a Friday night. The mood is cheerful as you mingle with other college students from a variety of backgrounds. When you go to use the bathroom, you are approached by your best friend who has tears rushing from his swollen red eyes. As you try to ask what has happened, you are cut off. Your best friend mutters, "My uncle, who was shot at a traffic light this afternoon. He's dead." This situation describes the loss of a loved one to a shooting, which is a realistic possibility in the United States. Though this is a hypothetical scenario, there has been a steady surge of shootings in the United States in recent years, as many of you may be able to attest through either media exposure or personal experience. According to journalist Trevor Hughes of USA Today, who cited findings from the Gun Violence Archive, the number of gun-related deaths per day in the United States as of August 2020 was 48.7, up nearly 7 deaths from the 41.7 average in 2019. I've grown up in an environment surrounded by family members who've used firearms for both protective and for hunting purposes. I've also completed numerous hours of extensive research on the topic of gun violence and control in the United States. Today, I hope to persuade you that the United States Congress should pass stricter legislation on gun control policy, specifically requiring universal licensing and safety training prior to the purchase of military-grade assault weapons, as well as prevention of purchase of firearms from individuals who are deemed extreme risk. I'll explain the alarming statistics concerning gun-related homicides as well as mass shootings in the United States. Then, I'll lay out a policy plan as well as ways that you can ensure that such action is achieved on the local level if you deem it necessary after this presentation. Let's first examine the recent startling statistics concerning gun violence in the United States over the past several years. There has been a strong increase in the number of gun-related homicides in the U.S. in particular over these recent years. Right here in Baltimore, Maryland, according to the Baltimore Sun, the number of gun-related homicides in 2018 was 274, an increase of 309 in 2019. At the end of November, we are already at 274 in 2020. This number is concerning for some of you that may travel through the city every day and illustrates the ability of guns to have a deteriorating effect on the overall safety of a city. Though gun-related homicides are increasing locally, they have also increased in other states as well. Kara Gavin, writer for the Michigan Health Lab, noted a detailed longitudinal study which found that the country as a whole has seen a 14% increase in firearm-related deaths from 2015 to 2017. The lead research and expert analysis, Jason Goldstick, who is based at UM Medical School, noted that, quote, "What we are seeing is a worsening firearm mortality that's geographically and demographically broad. Thus, the issue of gun-related violence affects not only metropolitan areas, as is common misconception, but the country as a whole." There's also been a sharp increase in the mass shootings in the United States over the past several years. Chris Knippe and one other of the journal Axios cited an examination of statistics over 20 years from 1999 to 2019 that found since 2017, 12 of the then 31 U.S. mass shootings were carried out by assault rifles, which were responsible for roughly 40% of the total deaths in the study and 92% of the injuries. The past 5 years in particular have seen some of the most horrific mass shootings, including at Parkland, Pulse, and Las Vegas, which all ranked in the top 10 of the study in terms of total deaths. The safety of the children are also at risk with these shootings, as Everytown Research noted that in 2020 there have already been a total of 28 injuries and 14 deaths on school grounds related to firearms. Sandy Hook is a mass school shooting that is still a painful memory for many of us, in which 26 people were killed. Thus, mass shootings can affect not only the most vulnerable or children, but the mass populace. The severity and increase in the number of gun-related deaths and mass shootings over the past several years speaks to the urgent need for action. These statistics can be reduced greatly through the direct action of the U.S. Congress. The Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019, according to Mark Barna, who analyzed the legislation, noted that it was a bipartisan bill that illustrated the effect of the Democratic and Republican parties to come together on gun violence and pass legislation to make change. I would propose a bipartisan bill that requires two fundamental components. First, it will require all states to mandate licensing as well as safety training prior to the purchase of any military-grade weapon, specifically assault rifles, at the least. Secondly, this bill would incorporate funding mentioned in the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2019 for states to both prevent purchase of and remove firearms from individuals who are deemed extreme risks. The first part of this bill would attempt to ensure that only those who have undergone the most extreme licensing and training are able to purchase the weapons that have the greatest ability to induce harm, as mentioned previously. Semi-automatic weapons were banned once under federal law in 1994 under the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which lasted for 10 years and speaks to the plausibility of such a less extreme measure. Thus, some may argue the suggested measure is implausible. However, it is less extreme and will thus be less of a financial burden, as it is not completely banning firearms but adding regulations. In this time, from 1994 to 2004, Giffords Law Center notes that mass shootings were 70% less likely to occur when examining before and after. Further licensing would not be a ban, but an extra precaution, which trumps the notion that this is an attempt to remove firearms from the mass populace. Furthermore, the second part of this proposal was once in the House of Representatives, according to Congress.gov, and with the recent bipartisan success, such a measure could effectively be implemented to remove firearms and prevent purchase of them from individuals who are extremists psychologically or based on their criminal past. Thus, weapons and individuals who potentially have the greatest ability to inflict damage on others would be regulated to an extent. In this respect, mass shootings and gun-related violence would likely decrease as it did in the 10-year span. However, there is local action that be taken to push such measures in Maryland, if you so desire, after seeing these relevant statistics related to the need, plausible plan, and potential success of what I have laid out. There are two simple methods by which one may put pressure on Congress. The first is to write to their respective congressmen, which is one of the most easiest ways to enforce such change. Despite the fact that Aaron Cox of the Washington Post noted that Maryland has some of the strictest gun laws, they still have some of the highest homicides related to guns. Another great way to impose change is by researching your candidate's policies prior to voting for the congressional elections. Today, I've described the need for a course of action that Congress should take to prevent further increases in gun-related deaths in the United States. They have surged over the past several years with an emergence of these severe mass shootings and homicide-related deaths. I hope today, now, that you see the way in which this issue must be faced with direct action through the United States Congress. The two-part bill I proposed would help to ensure such change is achieved, even if it takes time to pass, as it will make an impactful change. I encourage you to write to your congressperson and research your candidates before voting to make a true change. Safety is a standard in the United States, and our Congress has the power to ensure that this standard is upheld. No one should have to hear that their loved one was gunned down at a traffic light. No one should have to hear that their loved one was shot at all.